This week, we're learning about learning. Learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior, knowledge, capability, or attitude that is acquired through experience and cannot be attributed to illness, injury, or maturation. One type of learning is classical conditioning, which can be traced back to the work of Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov discovered that if we pair an unconditioned stimulus with a conditioned stimulus, then we can elicit a conditioned response from an unconditioned response. An unconditioned stimulus is a stimulus that elicits a specific unconditioned response without prior learning. A conditioned stimulus is a neutral stimulus that, after repeated pairing with an unconditioned stimulus, becomes associated with it and elicits a conditioned response. The unconditioned response is a response that is elicited by an unconditioned stimulus without prior learning. And the conditioned response is the learned response that comes to be elicited by a conditioned stimulus as a result of its repeated pairing with an unconditioned stimulus. You may have heard of Pavlov and his dogs. Pavlov discovered that if he paired an unconditioned stimulus, in his case, meat, with a conditioned stimulus, a bell, he could make a dog learn to salivate when the dog heard the bell. Now, as we know, most dogs do not salivate when they hear a bell, but they do salivate when they smell meat cooking. Pavlov paired the unconditioned stimulus, the meat, with the conditioned stimulus, the bell, over and over and over, until finally simply the bell elicited the conditioned response. Eventually, B.F. Skinner took classical conditioning one step further and made it operant conditioning. Skinner took a stimulus, it elicited a response, and then there was the consequence. A consequence can be either good or bad, and can affect behavior. A good consequence is a reinforcer, anything that follows a response and strengthens it or increases the probability that it will occur. A bad consequence is a punishment, the removal of a pleasant stimulus or the application of an unpleasant stimulus, thereby lowering the probability of a response. Since a consequence can be good or bad and can either increase or decrease the probability of behavior occurring, we also have negative consequences and positive consequences. Now, don't get confused. A negative consequence simply means we are taking something away, and a positive consequence simply means we are adding something to. In the case of negative punishment, we are taking something away to decrease a behavior. Simple enough. In the case of negative reinforcement, we are taking something away to increase behavior. A positive punishment is adding something to decrease behavior, and a positive reinforcer is adding something to increase behavior. That's this week's chapter, Chapter 5. You can read more about learning in our textbook.